Happiness is a paradoxical goal. We all want to be happy, yet we often fail spectacularly at predicting what will make us happy. We pursue goals like wealth, fitness, status, and mastery, only to find that achieving them doesn't really change our lives that much. In contrast, we often deliberately make ourselves miserable, worrying about things we can't control, holding grudges against people we cannot influence, and spending time on activities we don't really value. In this regard, I don't have any claim to have discovered the recipe for perpetual bliss, but from my decidedly unenlightened perspective, I found a few maxims that have helped make my life better that I'd like to share. Number 1, embrace the seasons of your life. Unhappiness is wishing that you could be at the beach when it's snowing outside. You can't control the weather, so daydreaming about a possibility that isn't practical doesn't make you better off. A major philosophical tension in the pursuit of happiness is between accepting things as they are and striving to change them for the better. But there is a third way, accepting the broadly unchangeable factors of your life and seeking to make the most of the things that are under your control. I think the weather analogy is an apt one. Every phase of life is a season that affords some possibilities and constrains others. Happiness is largely about maximizing the opportunities afforded by your current stage of life and not despairing the constraints. For instance, when I was in university, I really sought to maximize the experience. I went on exchange, I joined student council, I went to parties and tried out new activities. Now, as a father of 2, I'm content going to the farmers markets and making sandcastles at the beach. Number 2, striving is good, achieving is overrated. Most of the time, achieving goals won't make you any happier than you are right now. The main exception to this is when your current stage of life is chronically deprived of some essential need that achieving a goal would fix. Getting out of poverty improves your happiness, but getting really rich doesn't matter nearly as much. While some have taken this fact about human nature to imply striving is wasteful, I think it's more accurate to say that while achieving goals is overrated, striving toward them is underrated. Goals, projects, interests, and pursuits absorb our attention in positive directions. They take us away from abstract worrying or depressive navel-gazing. Activity is energizing, which is one reason why a major part of treatment for depression is getting the patient to simply do more things. The secret of the pursuit of happiness is that happiness is in the pursuit. Number 3, meet other people more than halfway. We are a chronically self-obsessed species. Nearly all of our thoughts are directed towards ourselves. Even those outwardly directed thoughts, most of those are really self-centered. We care about our relationship with other people. Vanishingly little mental capacity is directed towards others' viewpoints, absent our interest in them. Now, this may seem like a cynical observation, but I'd argue it's quite useful. If you believe that everyone is self-obsessed, that means you shouldn't overweight how much others are thinking about you. Relationships can break down because our slights to others are often invisible to ourselves. In contrast, we feel the sting of every missed birthday wish, every dropped calendar appointment, every subtle criticism. If you accept this asymmetry, then it makes sense to strive to meet others more than halfway. Be the one who reaches out to find time to meet. Be the one who congratulates and remembers important events. Be the one who is thoughtful and kind. Because when your aim is to meet people more than halfway, you're much more likely to connect in the middle. Number 4, apologize often. Everyone knows friends and family members who won't speak to each other because of some long-held grudge. While sometimes obligatory distance makes sense, especially in cases of abuse, usually these grudges began with some superficial slight that just worsened over time. Just as meeting people more than halfway can overcompensate for our built-in egocentrism, apologizing often can smooth over disputes to prevent feuds from festering. This isn't an emotional plea either. Game theory bears this out. The prisoner's dilemma is the classic game where you can either rat out your partner to get the best deal for yourself or cooperate and endure a mild punishment. If you play only once, the best strategy is to be selfish. However, relationships are, by definition, a repeated interaction. In those scenarios, the best strategy is called tit for tat with forgiveness. This isn't as soft as being a total pushover, but it also prevents the continued cycles of reprisals simply because one person accidentally made a mistake. Number 5, stop listening to people who are paid to make you angry. Our brains weren't designed for social media. Threatening, rage-enabling, and anxiety-inducing news is particularly appealing to our mental hardware. We were hardwired in an era when dangers and norm violations need to be quickly spotted and dealt with. Except now we live in a world with billions of people. Statistically speaking, something terrifying, enraging, and panic-inducing is happening to someone at every possible moment. In past eras, we were mostly able to ignore such things, as limits to reportage and norms on journalistic practice prevented events of limited newsworthiness from entering our field of consciousness. Algorithms designed to maximize engagement, however, now funnel every enraging triviality to the front of your attentional space. We need to take steps to curate our online consumption so we're not unwittingly making ourselves miserable over the statistical certainty that someone somewhere is doing something awful. Number 6, look for the small novelties. So when I was in university, I knew a guy, Nick, who lived on the same floor in our dorm rooms. Every week, a shuttle would pick us up and go to a nearby supermarket. This was a fair walk away. Only a few of us had cars, and this was Winnipeg, where winters can reach minus 40 degrees. I remember that he had a habit of buying one new food item every time he went, usually from the international section. Buying a bag of Mexican candy or an odd-looking fruit you'd never heard of before might seem like a fairly trivial action. Certainly not something that requires great effort, cost, or ability. But each week, he got to experience something new. I don't stick with Nick's habit as consistently as he did, but I found the same small bit of joy every time I try cuisine I've never eaten before, take a stroll in an unfamiliar park, or walk down a street I've never been down before. Much of happiness isn't found in the big things that we spend years striving toward in earnest, but in the little joys and moments that we can easily overlook if we're not paying attention. Number 7, remember everything is a choice. Within every constraint is a choice. Every forced option is actually a range of possibilities. Behind everything that must be done is a decision about how to think about it. In 2018, I went on a 10-day meditation retreat, and the biggest lesson for me was simply that even in the most confining situations, such as the necessity to sit in a rigid position for hours while only thinking about your breath, there is a world of choice available. Psychologists have long known that the locus of control for an event has a huge impact on our perception of it. Awful things feel much worse when they're uncontrollable. In contrast, believing that we have control makes even horrible events bearable. There will always be limits on what we can choose, but there will always also be space within those limits to make a choice. Reminding ourselves of that is often enough to regain the feeling of control and reduce the feeling of helplessness we have in the face of things we cannot. So those are my rules for happiness. What are yours? What kind of things do you live by that make you happier? Share your thoughts in the comments.